Welcome, Professor
Thank you.
Gail Holst-Warhaft, otherwise known to me as Gail,
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
welcome to the viewers of this YouTube video. This topic is why Theodorakis matters, and this is the centennial year of Mikis Theodorakis. He was born in 1925, and he passed away at the age of 96 in 2021. And in Greece, this has been the Mikis, the Greek government made it officially the year of Mikis Theodorakis and there have been any number of centennial tributes in Greece. I mean, countless of concerts, countless of wonderful conferences and symposia with artists, with political analysts, with cultural figures, with poets, and we're very fortunate to have an opportunity to do a little bit of that, to participate in that celebration with these online videos in English, in the English language, which to my knowledge hasn't been quite done. And it's wonderful to start with Gail today, because Gail was not just a member of the Theodorakis Orchestra at one point, but Gail has known Theodorakis for a long time. Gail is a poet in her own right, and she has written one of my favorite poetry collections called Penelope's Confession, and that's a bilingual edition, which I think is very, very important also. But Gail translates, Gail teaches at Cornell. She's a professor emeritus in comparative literature. She teaches beyond literature. She teaches a range of studies around Greek songs and music, but poetry also. And she has a number of books. I have a pile right here on my desk, but the most recent one is Mikis Theodorakis. And so welcome, Gail. I just want to say welcome, right, because I've been talking too much right now.
Thank you so much, Spyro. It's very nice to be talking to you, not just as we often do as friends, but to be talking about our mutual admiration for Theodorakis and his achievements.
Yes, yes. And I want to show the book that was just published by Cambridge Scholars Publishing. I'm just going to let's see, share the screen. Let me see if I can do this right. Just one moment, I'll pull it up. There it is. And there's the book titled Mikis Theodorakis, His Music and Politics by Gail Holst-Warhaft, and it's out of the Durrell Studies 6. And this is actually, it's based in part on the first book that you wrote on Theodorakis, which was in 1980, I believe.
Yes,
Is that
yes.
right? Yes, yes. But this is
Mhm.
a serious extension of it and a reworking of some of the musical analyses that you did. And certainly it is quite current. And it's invaluable. I actually own two copies of this book, uh,
Oh,
one for my home and one for my office in the city. Um, so what I want to, and by the way, this is one of many books. I think I could pull up some of the other books that Gail has written. Let's see. Yes, another recent one, 2016, actually, not that recent, but almost 10 years, is The Fall of Athens, which was really quite wonderful. Gail, besides being a poet, you're also a writer. And that's important. And here's Penelope's Confessions, and here's Lucky Country, another wonderful book of poems. Here's your first book, Dangerous Voices.
second book. You've
Oh, this
forgotten Road to Rebecca.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm so sorry because actually, let me see if I can find Road to Rebecca. There it is. And Road to Rebecca is actually one of your most popular books, and it actually changed the conversation in Greece and also has been translated in a number of languages. Road to Rebecca, that's right. and that was published in 75.
Yes, 75. So
75.
can you believe how old I am? That's
Well, you were 3 years old in 75.
about three, yes.
About
Maybe
three.
four.
But you had an affinity for Rebetica. But you did a lot of research on that. You did a lot of research. And the second book that you wrote is Dangerous Voices, which is a beautiful scholarly work, as are your other works. And even the photograph is majestic, the cover of that. And there have been other books too that this is one that did not have to do exclusively with Greece, called The Cue for Passion, which is a wonderful sort of in-depth study of grieving and mourning and how it's used often for political reasons. Anyway, one of my recent favorites is Nishiotika, and so wonderful, wonderful book. And I think you opened with that old Greek Nisiotiko song, Stopa και στο ξαναλέω.
Yeah, what a wonderful song. What a wonderful song.
Yeah, a
I
lot
think
of
that those songs are so beautiful. And, I hadn't realized when I first started writing it, how much they're related to laments. Most of them are written in the voice of women. And of course, the women on the islands in the old days who sang these songs were constantly grieving the fact that their sons or their husbands either disappeared at sea or emigrated to America or some other place, like your family. There was no livelihood on the island, so they were forced to emigrate.
That's right. It was forced migration.
Yes.
Forced economic migration. But there were all the serious losses. And in fact,
yes,
in that book, in Road to Rebetica, you have a wonderful section in there about epitaphios. Theodorakis' epitaphios, Yannis Ritsos and Theodorakis' epitaphios. Let me, the topic is why Theodorakis matters. And let me, before we actually get to that, what was your when did you first become aware of Theodorakis?
I went to Greece not knowing any Greek or anything about Greek music. And I got there at what I now realize was a wonderful moment in Greek music. It was a terrible moment politically. It was the end of 65, 66. And Theodorakis was tremendously popular, but under constant threat. And his concerts were being buzzed by aeroplanes and things like that. There were terrible things going on in his concerts. One night I was in a taverna with some other people having dinner, and they said, "See that man over there? That's Theodorakis." And I'd heard about him. And there he was with his wife and two kids having dinner in this taverna. And I of course, I didn't go up to him or anything, but I thought, gosh, I'm lucky. I'm sort of in the same space as this extraordinary man and terribly courageous man. And I began listening to him, but it was the coup that happened while I was there, the coup d'etat of April 67, when I was amazed and appalled, but also amazed and somehow admiring to think that when the junta came to power, this military dictatorship, Theodorakis went into hiding, and it was forbidden to even play one of his records. And it was the 13th proclamation of the dictatorship. The usual things were said about people not gathering in public spaces and so on. And the 13th proclamation was a complete ban on the music of Theodorakis, including playing even one of his love songs in your house. And I thought, God, this country must love music. They must find it powerful stuff. Why would you have to ban it?
Yes.
And that was one of the first things that sort of got me interested in the music of Theodorakis. I mean, what was it about this music that made it something they had to ban? And that was I suppose, my first interest in Theodorakis. And then on the day after the coup, a friend of mine, a poet friend of mine, went and bought me a copy of this wonderful sequence of songs called Epitaphios, with a picture of Theodorakis on the cover.
Huh.
And he said, by tomorrow you won't find a copy of this in all of Athens.
Oh
So,
my. Oh.
so this has been a treasure. I still have this
You do the
I
original.
do the 10-inch LP with Theodorakis at the piano and Busy Koutoulas and Hyotis standing over him. And
Oh, that's a wonderful photograph. I wish I
it's
had
a
it
one,
available
yeah,
right now. Yes. So
yeah,
well, that was the version of Epitaphios under Theodorakis' direction that really was a major breakthrough in music, in a kind of, in some ways, created a renaissance, a cultural renaissance. Would you agree?
yes, yes, I think so. I think so, and I think it was one of the most amazing phenomena in sort of popular music. Although I hate to use that word, it sounds so it can be misused. What he was doing was writing in popular style, but always transforming that popular music into some sort of marriage between the wonderful poetry of Greece and his great song melodies. But as somebody who was also interested in Rebetiko and in the sort of bouzouki music that was popular at the time, I found all aspects of it completely fascinating. You know, for one thing, he was an intellectual composer writing settings of beautiful, intellectual, if you like, poetry of high order, and mixing that with the most low-class music in Greece, the music of the sort of back streets of Piraeus. It was such an extraordinary amalgam of elements of Greek culture that it led a revolution where you could hear, if you went into a cheap little tavern, you could hear on a jukebox, you could hear the poetry of Ritsos being set to music with bouzouki and a popular singer. I mean, it was something totally amazing to me.
Yes, I think for me uh, it was as if he refused to separate high poetic art and
Mm-hmm.
the music of the underground, the music of the working class. He sort
Yes.
of collapsed that gap.
Yes.
Somehow he did it so brilliantly, and but not without critics at the time.
No, no. No, people thought that it was an insult to Ritsos's poetry, even though Ritsos was a leftist, like Theodorakis, a Marxist, and all his life he was a Marxist. But even though he was on the left and people criticized him who were on the right, they all recognized that he was a wonderful poet and a high poetic voice in the country. And to mix that with bouzouki music was like mixing Shakespeare with rock or something. It was that sort of amalgam of what seemed to be to the Greeks very disparate elements to some Greeks, but
Some Greeks, not to
some
all.
other
Yes,
Greeks,
yes,
other
yes.
Greeks were delighted.
Well, he in a way he allowed the vast majority of Greeks that would hear music at the time access to the poems.
That's exactly. I mean, Greeks did read poetry. I was amazed at how many Greeks read and memorized poetry. But the sort of Greeks that he was reaching might have read some poetry, but the fact that they could all then sing it and that they would
Yes,
sing it when they were gathered together around a table was something completely new. That
yes,
sort of
yes,
mixture.
yes. And these were the same songs that the academics were singing and the
Yes,
intellectuals were singing. So there was a uniting in some ways across socioeconomic, socioeducational classes. I mean, it's really
yes, yes.
funny. And
Quite
I
quite
know,
remarkable.
yes, yes, yes. And I know one of the first times I was introduced, this was as an adolescent. Um, uh, my cousin, a very beloved cousin of mine, it must have been in the mid 60s. Uh,
Mhm.
so he's playing songs they used to have these huge cassettes in the cars, and
That's right.
collecting them, or I forget what exactly he had, records or cassettes, I don't remember.
Mm.
But what I remember was this was different than the music that I was used to, the Nisiotica that I was used to.
Yes.
This was
Yes.
different than the kind of harsh rebetika that I found interesting, but not particularly appealing. Uh,
Hmm.
so for me, that was one of the earliest introductions, and it was really, it felt different to me. It just
Yes.
very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I was just, it was when I was there. It was the age of the jukebox, and every little tavern and cafe had a jukebox, and to be able to sort of put the equivalent of a dime in the jukebox and get out this extraordinary music, and not only that, but some of the songs people actually danced to. Some of the zebekika,
yes,
the solo male dance, were danceable even if they were talking about tragic subjects.
yes, yes. Well, the Zebekiko, in some ways, is the Zebekiko dance is not a exuberant dance,
No,
right?
no,
It's improvisational,
it
right?
shouldn't be. I think it
Yeah,
should
it
be.
shouldn't be. Yes,
It should be a very internal. It
yes,
sometimes
yes,
is
yes,
danced as
yes.
something, but the best the zebekika I feel are very let's say very serious and tremendously self-expressive. You dance this for yourself, not for an audience. You dance
Yes,
it
yes,
completely for yourself.
yeah,
Mind you, everybody's watching and everybody's judging, but they talk about, if a man doesn't put his soul out there on the floor, then he's not dancing as a bekiko. As a bekiko is to put yourself out there on the floor.
yes. It reminds me of the line that is a little you see on posters now that says "Dance as if no one is watching," but of course
Really?
people are watching. Yes, yes,
Yeah. Yeah, I've never seen that, but that's
yeah,
exactly what
yeah.
it's about.
It may have been uttered by Henry Miller, but I'm not sure. Not
Hmm.
sure. And in any event, uh, so and you actually met Theodorakis when you were in Australia.
1972, yes. After the first year of the junta, I began to feel very guilty to be living in Greece, which I thought was paradise when I arrived. But I realized, I began to learn what was happening during the junta and about torture and systematic, really brutal torture of anybody who opposed the junta. And I went, first of all, to London and joined a group of Greek friends. One of them was a close friend, and went to meetings. And there were lots of exiled Greeks, self-exiled Greeks there, intellectuals and so on, and journalists who were talking about what they might do, and they were even talking about bombs and letting off bombs in Ammonia Square and so on. And but all we did most of the time was sort of sing Theodorakis songs and feel tearful. But Maria Farandouri came to London and gave a concert in a great big venue that no longer exists in Chalk Farm. And it was completely full of Greeks, and I think it held 2,000 people. And there wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. People just wept. Andonis Kalogiannis and Maria. And, that got me more involved than ever. But I did go to see a couple of English women who had an organization that supported the families of prisoners. They sent parcels. The families, the wives and the families of prisoners in Greece, political prisoners, were in a terribly difficult position. They couldn't get work. They were, or their husbands were in jail, and it was a very, very difficult, situation for them. And so these women were sending parcels to them and messages to people in the resistance. And one of them said to me, "Why don't you go back to Australia, where there's a big Greek community, and you can organize with the Greeks there?" Which I eventually did. But Theodorakis, when he was released in 1970, 71, went to Paris, where he had a second home, where he had studied. And he began touring the world with Maria Farandouri and other musicians. And they came to Australia. By this time, I had joined a committee for the restoration of democracy in Greece. And I was a sort of odd person because I was Australian and not Greek. And we did a lot of publicity and whatever we could. And we went out to the airport when Theodorakis arrived to meet him. And the Greek community had forgotten to bring an interpreter. So they shoved me into a seat next to him and said, interpret. And at that stage, I wasn't really up to interpreting Theodorakis, and I was terrified. But as usual with Theodorakis, who had a wonderful sense of humor, he took one look at me, sort of trembling in the seat, and began to make jokes. And within 5 minutes, I had recovered and managed to do a pretty rough job of translation. And that was my first meeting with him. And of course, I was completely bowled over by this personality. He was just an extraordinary, he was 6'4", which was very tall in Greece. And his personality was similarly large. Everything about him was large. His gestures were large. And when he gave concerts, people in the audience, Australians who didn't know a word of Greek and didn't really know who he was, they were all crying. It was so emotional. The atmosphere in these concerts was just amazing.
Well, there was something contagious about his energy and his passion, especially his passion.
Yes.
And the cause. He had really suffered badly in World War II as a very young man, as a late adolescent. He had been imprisoned and tortured a number of times. Brutally tortured.
Brutally.
In a way that is very hard to comprehend how he even managed to survive.
Yes.
Physically, let alone mentally, how he managed to survive.
You as a psychologist must think about that. I think about it a lot, and I wonder, how does anybody resume a normal life after that sort of brutal torture? I don't know.
Yes.
But he certainly did.
He certainly did. He certainly suffered for it mentally, but he was able to recover. His explanation, and from what I've understood in having met with him countless of times in his home in Athens, and also been to a number of his concerts and have studied his life through your work, through your extraordinary biographical work, not just biographical, but an unpacking of the music. I think that you've done that so magnificently. But my understanding is that he was indeed able to use his natural and well-developed disciplined study of music to somehow stay alive and use what Sophia Richmond, my spouse, my better half, calls a kind of a creative transformation of trauma.
Yes.
And he was able to express what was going on. I think that I still am in awe of how much of his personal experience has imbued even his classical music, let alone his songs. Or the reason why, and you've done the translations on this, he wasn't in a German concentration camp, but he could understand Campanellis's experience of being at Mauthausen, for example. And there was a way that he got it. He in that indirect way helped himself and continued to help himself. And of course, I think something similar happened. You translated the entire book by Campanellis and also the 4 Mauthausen arias, poems. But I think Campanellis did something very similar too. He used his natural gifts, which again were well developed. In other words, they didn't just. A lot of people are born with natural gifts, but they don't develop them. They don't take the time to study or they don't have the discipline, the perseverance, the stick-to-itiveness to
I like that. Stick-to-itiveness is
yes,
good.
yes, that's a
Is a good
technical
one.
psychoanalytic term, stick-to-itiveness. I don't know where I got that from, but uh, uh, maybe my grandson, sometimes once he said to me, "You have to stick with it, Papu. You have to stick with it." Okay, I'll stick with it. But uh, I do.
Yeah, I think that he also, yeah, I think he used music to absent himself from where he was. He told me, he said, when they were torturing me, I wouldn't be there. I'd be somewhere else. And he used to be in his music, to listen to music or something. Even in the worst moments, he was able
Yes,
to absent himself as a person
yes.
from
Well,
what was happening to his body.
that's a healthy mental dissociation.
Yeah.
That's what was happening there. There was a
Hmm.
healthy mental dissociation. I say that because sometimes we think about dissociation when people are dissociated as really being terribly unhealthy and painful
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
counterproductive.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think he had that capacity of using the shift in his mental state, the
Hmm.
shift away from the present moments of torture, of
Yes,
anguish, of
yes,
despair, and go to a place where he was creating. He was
yes,
staying vital. There was
yes,
a
yes,
way
yes.
that he was staying vital.
I think the other thing was that there was solidarity in these camps, that he wasn't alone. He was
That's right.
among people who felt like he did and thought like he did. And that must have helped the feeling that he wasn't being singled out, although he sometimes was singled out for extraordinary punishment. But
Yes.
um, there were people who were being killed in the camp.
Yes.
Thousands were killed in Makronisos. And
Yes. Yes.
so he didn't feel that he was alone with that suffering. I think that
Yeah.
must have been some comfort to him.
Well, I think he was, he and the others were dealing with collective trauma as opposed
Yes,
to
yes,
individual
yes,
trauma. And I think that there's a difference. In collective trauma, you do, if you're fortunate, have that solidarity with others who have been injured, who have been wounded, who
yeah,
have been murdered sometimes.
yes, yes,
It's a
yes,
way of I think you're absolutely right, Gail, that collective experience, which is also was at one point in many ways in the past, Greece was a collectivistic culture.
yeah, yes,
One of my favorite island sayings is, "Don't tell me what you ate last night. Tell me who you ate with."
yeah.
Uh, and I
That's
think
good. That's good.
well,
That's
it's not.
very Greek.
It's very Greek, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, who do you hang out with? Who are
Mm,
you
mm,
with?
mm,
Who is your
mm,
parea? I
mhm.
want to shift a little bit, and although this has been, we could go on for a long time about some of these details, and obviously you've had these so many intimate moments with Theodorakis,
Mm.
because I don't think he considered you just a translator or an interpreter or a scribe. I think that the two of you were friends. And
Oh, yes,
you
I
were
think so. And
friends.
I felt very proud of the fact that he said, you are one of my close friends. And
Yes,
that was one of something I felt tremendously proud and happy about.
yes. I often, when I would talk with him, he would say, "Rota to Gail," ask Gail about that. So that was really quite sort of was impressed on me that you were the go-to person if I had questions and he wasn't available.
About the music. Yeah.
Yeah, about the music, but also other things. I mean,
Yeah.
and at times he was actually worried about you too.
Yeah. Why was he worried?
Well, he was worried that you were spending too much time with Savopoulos, I think.
Oh, yes, I did go. I did betray him and play with Sophopoulos
He
for a
didn't
couple
say
of
you
months.
betrayed him. He didn't say that. But
Well, he was very resentful of the fact that I did play in Sophopoulos' band for a short time, and then I made the recording with Sophopoulos of Achadnis. And
Yes.
he thought this was somehow disloyalty to
Yes.
the
But I
man that,
wanted to,
yes.
yes, it's funny because even at the very end, Savopoulos would appear at Theodorakis' celebratory
Yes, yes.
concerts. So there was a way that Savopoulos clearly also appreciated him,
Oh,
despite their history, which was they
yeah.
were different kinds of musicians, different kinds
Yes,
of
yes, very.
composers. Yeah, and there's always been this artificial dichotomy between, in my view, Hatzidakis and Theodorakis about
Oh,
the
yes, who were
media.
also very good friends, very good.
Exactly. I mean, there's this media mythology that was created. But
Yes.
I want to return to the idea of how would you answer the question why Theodorakis matters?
I think Theodorakis matters. I think he's for one thing, one of the great composers of the 20th century, and that's not that's not a small thing. He wrote extraordinary music, classical music, operas, and popular music, and I still think that his great gift was this marriage of poetry and music, a wonderful feeling, and I think a bit unusual in that the inspiration, he said, always came from the poem, not the other way around. I've got a good tune, I'll find a poem that goes with it. It was always, he read a poem and he was emotionally carried away by the poem and he decided to set it to music. So it was always that combination of word. And as he went on with his writing of symphonies, he had a very successful career as a sort of contemporary composer in Paris, working with Messiaen and so on. But as he wrote more classical music in the 1980s, 90s, he could not resist putting more words into it. He'd use poems in the symphonies, choral sections or sections of a symphony that were for voice as well as instruments. I think he found it hard to write anything that wasn't a marriage of poetry and music. And I think his ability and his sensitivity to the poetic line was something very outstanding and wonderful. So yes, he matters because of that. He matters because he bore witness in a way that no other artist did to the suffering of the left. I think that no other artist in Greece was more sort of emblematic of the struggle of the left. The left in Greece has a tragic history, as we know, and I think a lot of people were sort of for the rest of their lives damaged by the civil war and by the metapolitos, the restoration of democracy, which didn't bring the sort of idealistic society that they had dreamt of. In fact, it was pretty corrupt, even when it was a so-called socialist regime. It was a pretty corrupt one. And they felt as if they had been betrayed. And he stood as a symbol, I think, to many people of that struggle of the left. And I think it's reflected in all his music, of a struggle of always a struggle for, not for revenge or for a restoration of what might have been. It was always a struggle for some sort of peace and harmony between people.
Yes, and
We have this
justice.
idea of universal harmony, and I
Yes,
think that also related to his feeling about society, that society should be in harmony, and that the forces of left, right, whatever you call them, could find a way to, as he said in the Ballad of the Dead Brother, that even if that two brothers fought on opposite sides, somehow they could be united in death or united somehow with their ideologies. And I think that, I think that like Neruda in Chile, for example, he had this ability to reach a very broad audience, not only in Greece, but abroad. People who saw him as a symbol of resistance to dictatorship, resistance to war, etc.
Yes. Yeah. Well, to your point of a minute or two ago, uh, I know I was introduced as an adolescent to Greek poetry via Theodorakis.
Yeah.
Because when I realized that, oh, these songs are different, what, you know, it was really, it was eye-opening for me. And it actually it opened me up to develop other sides of my identity. Certainly the Greek side, but even the poetic side. And how do they do this? How do these poets do this? How does Theodorakis set these poems to where do these melodies come from, etc.? I mean, they're astonishing, awakening in many ways. For me personally, and I suspect that happened to many people, especially people in the diaspora. I think that there was a way to stay connected, and but he also, and I know you've pointed it out too earlier, that he didn't just use poets of the left.
No.
He also, he said Seferis and Elitis, who
Yes.
not exactly of the left. I mean, they weren't fanatics or anything like that, but they had a certain kind of distaste, perhaps, for the left.
And distaste for certainly for Theodorakis. I mean, Seferis refused to appear on the platform with him at an event during the dictatorship. He said, "I'm not going to stand on the platform with that communist."
Yes,
I mean, this is amazing. This is a man whose poetry became known to the whole country through the songs of Theodorakis.
Yes. But also at his funeral, who are they? What music are they playing?
Theodorakis, of course.
Theodorakis στο περιάλη το κρυφό, denial. So the coffin is accompanied with the Theodorakis.
It's amazing. That's an amazing.
And Theodorakis was still banned at the time.
Yeah.
He was still banned. There's a certain kind of irony to that. That I think it's hard to fully grasp, but there's always been a certain kind of polarity that's operated in Greece. He was, for example, I just want to, I believe you mentioned it in the book, that he did work. I'm paraphrasing you, but he worked at integrating or bringing the Apollonian and the Dionysian closer together.
Yes. Yeah. He was very attracted to Dionysus and thought that his personality was Dionysian, but he also had an Apollonian side. But
he couldn't write all that music.
No.
All that classical music.
He was extraordinarily disciplined and extraordinarily hardworking, and that never stopped all his life. He just worked, and he got up in the morning and he worked, And he when he didn't have much money, he was he for example, for Axionisti, he wrote out all the instrumental parts by hand himself. I remember looking in the archive in Athens at the old, original score, and there are these penciled scores for the tympanum and the violins and the French horn, whatever it is. He's busy transcribing all this stuff for the orchestra, and that is a labor and a rather tedious labor, but it's labor, and it's one of the things that struck me most about Theodorakis is that he never wasted a moment. He worked tremendously hard. When he relaxed, but he still got up in the morning every morning and worked for 4 or 5 hours before he stopped for lunch and so on.
Yes, and it's interesting to me that sometimes he would have to he would work on pieces for a long time, but it would help him to be in Paris
Yes.
because he could concentrate better.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yes.
away from the daily sort of political dramas.
Yes. Yes. Something that struck me when we were, I played on a tour of the Peloponnese with him. I only played on one of the country tours, but I later played in Epidaurus with him. But in this first tour, he was working on the music for Extros Laos, enemy people, and he had a tune, and I could see that he was trying to imperfect it. After the concerts, the band's instruments were all packed up, and it was a lot of work packing up all this stuff and all the electronics and the speakers and so on. And there would always be a piano on the stage. And Theodorakis would sit at the piano while chaos reigned around him, and people were throwing things around and putting away instruments. And he'd be there working on this tune. And I thought, will he get it out? He was, I could see a few notes, and then a few more notes. Finally, this wonderful melody came out. And I thought, oh, my God, I'd love to be able to have that gift that he had for melody. It was something.
Even for one melody, I would give a decade's salary to have written one melody like his.
Well, that was something that, like Asteris, one of his lead bouzouki players, said to me. We met at Theodorakis' 80th birthday celebrations in Crete, and I hadn't seen him for years because he'd moved to Norway. And he said, I said, well, what are you doing? He said, I'm composing now. I'm writing my own songs and so on. And I said to Theodorakis, he said, if you'd only give me just one, he said, out of all the hundreds you've written, just one melody like you write, that would do me for a lifetime, he said.
Yes. And he knew the music well.
Of course he did.
He was
yes.
an amazing
bouzouki player.
Along with his partner Kostas Papadopoulos, they were.
Oh, the two of them
were. My God, how they.
What happened? An interesting thing there was that when the fashion started for bringing in urban folk music, which is what the Rebetika were. They were urban folk music. And most of the musicians were musically illiterate. They couldn't read a score or anything. And so was Kartnesis. They didn't read scores. But they were reliable and they were extremely technically good, and they could learn something very quickly. So Columbia Records had wasted so much time on musicians coming out of the streets of the probably high or drunk or something, and turning up in the studio late, or turning up and not being able to learn the music fast, that they employed these two young, they found these two young, very talented bouzouki players, and they employed them, and you had to use them. Theodorakis said you had no choice. If you wanted to record with that studio, with Columbia, which was the biggest studio at the time, you had to use Papadopoulos and Kartnesis, because they could learn their stuff. They turned up on time. They were totally reliable musicians.
Yes, well, certainly a company like Columbia would need professionals.
Yes,
to do their work and ultimately produce the recordings. But I think you're right that they had a wonderful rapport with Theodorakis. A wonderful.
Yes, they did.
As did the first bouzouki player, Chiotis, who Theodorakis considered incredibly talented. Theodorakis traveled a lot. He was he did not restrict himself to just performing in Greece, which would have been easier for him in many ways. But he liked going. Did he like going on tours? And what was your experience? Because it seemed to me, having seen him a number of times perform at Carnegie Hall and Fisher Hall, and he enjoyed that a lot.
Oh yes. He liked the fact that people loved him. I mean, it's pretty normal. He was very popular.
It's pretty healthy. Go where the people love you, where be with loved ones.
I mean, he also wanted his music to reach a wider and wider audience. And, yesterday I was talking in this conference in Hanya remotely, and I was talking about the fact that he produced visiting cards, I thought, of, of cultures where he felt an identification with certain cultures. And one of the tours that he did after 1970, when he went to Paris, was Latin America. He went to Argentina, he went to Chile, and he decided to set Pablo Neruda to music, partly because during that period, he didn't know if he'd ever be able to return to Greece. Yes. These musicians, and he thought that maybe it might be 20 years before they ever saw their country again.
Yes.
And they talked
What a sad state to be in.
Oh,
incredibly
terrible.
Sad, especially for people like Theodorakis and all the other artists. Yeah. And people who were not artists who were worried about returning to Greece. Yeah.
Yes, I mean this we take for granted that this is a country, of course, has always been somewhat friendly to immigrants, and Theodorakis and his musicians all felt that the place they had a sense that they would enjoy living in was South America, especially Argentina and Chile. They felt that the Latin American people were closer to Greeks than any other people that they had encountered, and that it was full of wonderful music and rhythms and so on. And he ended up producing this, I think, a masterpiece of music that was Greek in parts, with Greek melodies and Greek rhythms, but also Latin American, with Latin American rhythms and motifs. And of course, he decided to do it in Spanish. It was as if he's saying, look, this is what I can do for your culture, yes, like I've done for Greece. And he presents this extraordinary work as like, this is my introduction, this is my overture.
Yes.
Take us in if you're interested.
Yes.
And had Allende not been assassinated, had that terrible coup of 1973 not happened, I think they might have settled in, at least temporarily, in Chile, where they were very welcome, and where this overture, as I call it, of Canto General, had created a public for him. And the same thing, in a way, with Irish music, that when he said Brendan Behan's songs, he felt that there was this affinity between Ireland and Greece. They're both sort of on the edges, small countries on the edges, fringes of Europe, that had been severely oppressed. And, so he's traveling. While he was traveling and while he was looking at other cultures, I think he always looked for similarities and affinities with the culture of other countries. And I think Ireland and South America and Russia were perhaps the countries that he felt some strong attraction to.
Yes, I think that there was a way that he could see the humanity of the countries. He was always very concerned about the brutality and the exploitation of the superpowers. And although he always appreciated the people, I remember when at one point it may have been in 95, when he was giving a series of concerts in North America, and it's Easter time, and he's on the Greek radio, and he said that the Greeks in America should, of course, be connected to Greece and never, not forget where they came from. But he also said they should also celebrate where they are here. There was something about that, and I think I may have the recording of that radio interview somewhere. But he was aware that Greece was in some ways a unique nation with a unique history, but he was also aware that there were others with unique properties, other nationalities, other ethnic
Yes.
groups. And,
Yes.
he was in South America, South Africa,
Yeah.
and, giving concerts with Nelson Mandela attending the concert.
Hmm.
So he was very much involved all over the world, probably more so in South America. I think you're right. There was an
Hmm.
affinity that he felt somehow. There was
Yes.
just
Yes.
something
Yes.
about that that was very important. And of course, Canto General is an extraordinary piece of
Yes.
music. It's
Yes.
absolutely extraordinary. Um,
Hmm.
and it's certainly one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I have,
And the fact that he chose that as the work that he wanted to produce when he first came back after the dictatorship, he returned and after giving the huge, big concert of a mixture of his work in Karaiskakis Stadium, the next big thing that he did was a production of Canto General with the original scoring, which was for the percussions of Strasbourg and two pianos. It was a very unusual combination, a very unusual. And the percussions of Strasbourg were able to I think, follow a difficult score. I know because I was analyzing the score and I found it so difficult. I didn't have a score. In fact, I was listening to it and I was sort of I was in London at the time and I was sort of lying on the ground listening again and again and trying to notate the rhythms. And he alters. It sounds like one continuous sort of rhythm in every piece, but it's not. There are bars that are in a different rhythm. It's very subtle, and they were a wonderful percussion group, and they performed it with. Later, he recorded it with an orchestra in Germany, but the original recording has this scoring, which was for this absolutely brilliant percussion group and two pianos and very percussive piano writing.
yes.
Wonderful, wonderful piece, and of course Faranduri and Pandis were.
Incredible, awesome,
incredible singing, just incredible singing. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when he was studying music in Athens as a very young man, in addition to piano, he had gotten a job at the Athens Music Conservatory as a percussionist.
Yes.
So he actually had studied. I mean, was a percussionist at some point for some of the big symphonic works that they were doing. So he had an affinity, and of course, I think there's something. He understood rhythm.
He did.
He understood rhythm very well, which I think is so foundational to music, and he got it.
He was a fabulous. His whole body when he conducted was like an instrument to me.
Yes.
It was. He would move, not just his arms, but the whole body would be involved in the rhythm of the piece.
Yes.
Impossible for the orchestra not to follow him because it was such a definite.
I don't remember him. I think maybe once I saw him with a baton. Usually he didn't have one. Usually
he didn't need one.
Those arms that were
huge arms and
incredible.
It's one of the most on the cover of my book. I wanted one where he had his arms out because this was so characteristic.
Well, you do have it, don't you?
Yes. On the cover, he's standing there with his arms out, and I thought this is the most. As I heard people
there
say,
it is. There it is.
Yeah, there he is with the arms wide, and there he has a baton, which was unusual.
That's right, but he's in Germany there, I think.
Yeah, he's in Germany. Well, you're expected to have a baton.
Yes, he wanted to be taken seriously.
I've heard people say who were, Greeks who one woman I met who had been in a chorus and he came to conduct the chorus in one of his works, and she said, when his fingers went out, it was as if he were bringing the music with his fingers out of us. We didn't have to do anything; he just brought it out of us.
What magnificent magic that
was.
Magic. Talk about harmony and being in tune, literally and figuratively. I mean, that whole experience of him.
Yeah, when I first came to America, I came to America when I married an Australian professor at Cornell, and he was in the engineering department, and a colleague came from Israel to visit him, and Theodorakis, perhaps a year earlier, had conducted a concert in an ancient theater in Israel, and so that we went out to I suppose a dinner or something with this colleague plus his wife, and she asked me what I did, and I talked about Greek music and Theodorakis and so on. And she looked at me and she put her hand in her pocket and she brought out this crumpled little thing, a piece of paper, and she said, "This is a ticket that I had for the Theodorakis concert." And she said it was the most wonderful experience of my life. So I was and I thought, he was able to work that magic for people who didn't even know Greek. What was he able to do for the Greeks? If he could do that to somebody who knew not a word of Greek.
Yes.
It was
well,
amazing.
I think what was he able, I mean, that's an incredible question. That's a very powerful question. What was he able to do with the Greeks? I mean, I think he did a tremendous amount. I think in a way and I think he did this consciously, he helped them remember what they had forgotten in many ways.
Yes.
And
that's interesting.
That goes
what sort of things would you, what sort of
the
things?
Witnessing, you referred to at the beginning. I mean, the witnessing, he would, when he wrote the Ballad of the Dead Brother, he's writing about the Greek Civil War and the consequences, because it wasn't just that people died during the Greek Civil War. It wasn't just that they went missing or they were killed. It was also the terror of it, terror that affected families for generations.
That's right.
We know that trauma is transmitted across generations, certainly for collective trauma. I mean, how often do we still talk about the Asia Minor catastrophe?
Yes, yes.
And how when are these huge national traumas ever fully healed? I'm not sure. I mean, I think I don't quite have the capacities of the political scientists or the historians to understand it. I understand it from my own small angle.
Not so small, I'd say.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was that.
Anyway, I know what you're talking about, and I think that I think he gave tremendous courage to people who were needing it and didn't have it.
Absolutely, absolutely. He inspired people.
One of my favorite stories about Theodorakis' music is that in the first elections after the restoration of democracy in Greece, I was a correspondent for a newspaper in Australia then, a left-wing newspaper, the only one, and it was named after the American nation. It was called Nation Review.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I thought, well, I'll get opinions from people. I'll travel around and see what people are talking about in terms of the elections. And I went to the island of Ithaca, which I had never seen, and it was winter, and it was deserted. It seemed deserted, and in the evening, I thought, oh, well, I'll find some people in a taverna or something. It was completely dead, not a taverna, with nothing going on, sort of a deserted cafe. I thought, oh, this is a failure. And then I heard something going on. There's a little sound of music in a back street. And I went into a little wine bar, which had about 6 barrels of wine and 6 people in it. And there was a group of men sitting around a little tin table, those little round tables, and they were singing Theodorakis. And I went in and sat in another table nearby and, had a glass of wine. And they looked at me and I was singing along with them and I knew all the words. So one of them, after a little while, turned to me and he said, δεν μου λέτε μήπως είσαι δημοκράτησα. And I thought, what an amazing thing to say. Excuse me, but are you by any chance a Democrat? In other words, are you with us on the left rather than the right? And after a while, we started, talking more, and they said, we are the left of Ithaca. And I thought, this is what had happened on places that were conservative, villages that were conservative, islands that were conservative. The left were completely isolated. They'd been in prison for years. They'd been in exile. And there they were gathered together singing Theodorakis. And I thought, that is what they're holding on to. This is something they have to hold on to.
Yes. It's funny because that story, it reminds me of an experience I had at a concert of Theodorakis in New York City at Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
And I'm sitting with my father,
yes,
who was old at the time. And my father came from a very remote Greek island, Erikusa, right where the Adriatic meets the Ionian Sea. And they were, it's a very provincial island. They were all royalists at the time. When they grew up.
Yes.
And of course, so we're listening to the concert, and Theodorakis is, just incredible, right? And the garden is trying to turn down the lights because they've gone over time, but Theodorakis continues singing, don't weep for Romiosini.
Yes.
It's just powerful. And there are incredible applause. And my father turns to me and he says, and I'm going to translate it in English, he says, he makes you applaud him even though you don't want to.
Good. That's a good one.
And I said, well, maybe, I said to him, maybe somewhere deep within you want to.
Yes, I mean, I think a lot of people were affected who were sort of on the right of Greek politics and disapproved of his politics. A lot of people were won over by the music.
Yes, yeah. But
if they met him, if they met the man, they were won over by his personality too.
Yes, and if they met the music, they would hear the messages. Remember and sort of really appreciate the suffering of others. And in a way that was really at times inhuman.
Yes.
That was going on.
Yes.
But I want to end on a little, because we're running out of time, and I wanted to just say that you mentioned it. He was also a man of humor. He was a man who could enjoy many things. He wasn't a morbid man. He was not a moment. Even when he reminisced, or even when he was nostalgic, he managed to be upbeat. He managed to be so related. And what you see on stage and how he communicates in his music is also how I felt, and I think you felt too, if I may. He was engaging on a personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. And loved to talk. Absolutely loved to talk.
Yes.
And you would sit there. I mean, every time I was in Athens, I spent hours with him. Most of it, he was talking. And I got a few words in edgeways.
But he had such interesting things to say.
So many things to say. And he was so funny. I mean, he was always funny about everything.
One of the things I remember once, I very gently and humbly disagreed with him on something, and he says, "Θα το σχαλίσω μετά." We'll work on that, or we'll unpack that later.
Yes. We'll dig into that later.
We'll dig into that. That's right. Θα το σχαλίσω better. You see, there's the poet. There's the translator. I love that. Thank you, Gail. Gail, this has been wonderful, and I appreciate your time and your effort and your friendship and all the ways that you have contributed. I've said this before, I've said it publicly. You are a Greek treasure,
Oh,
and on many
treasure.
levels. So
I'm a Greek fan, I can tell you that.
to be continued.
Yes, okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, thank
Gail.
you, Spyro. Thank you.
Be well. Nasa ka lang.
Ευχαριστώ.